In the last movie, we added a method called authenticated to our admin user model that will determine if a set of username password values match a user in the database. Now we want to use that method in a controller by creating a login form and a login action that will do the authentication. We'll begin by generating a new controller that will handle the user access. So I'm in the root of my Rails application, and you should remember how to generate a controller. Generate controller, and we're going to call it access. Now here's a helpful shortcut. If there are actions which you're going to use which also need templates, it's very helpful if you just list them right after it, and we'll go ahead and create the templates for you. It's a nice little shortcut. So after the name of the controller, then the names of the actions. So menu and login. You can see here that it went ahead and actually created a template for menu and login. Let's open up our simple CMS. And inside controllers, here's our access controller. Here's the action. And inside our views for access, we have login and menu. Now, these aren't going to be the only actions we're going to use. Those are just the ones that had templates. I'm also going to have an index action, which will just default to being the menu. So render menu. The menu is just going to be a display text and links. That's all it's going to do. It'll let us navigate to the other controllers. Login is going to be the login form. That will display the login form. Then we'll have something that will process that. I'm going to call it attempt login. That will attempt to process the login form. If the user succeeds, then they'll be redirected to the menu. If they fail, they'll go back to the login. And then last, let's have logout, which will just simply log the user out and redirect them back to the login form so that they could log in again if they need to. So let's begin by creating the two templates that we're going to need here. Let's go with menu first. So for menu, I'm just going to paste in some code. It's just a real simple menu. We've got a placeholder here for a future feature we'll have, which is logged in as, and whatever the user we're logged in as. And then just a list of links. That's all it is. So we're going to be able to manage subjects, pages, sections, or admin users. And each one of those will take us to a different controller. Admin user is just a placeholder for now. And then logout will take us to that logout action. So that's going to be our main menu, and will let us navigate around to the other areas. So I'll save that. Now let's go to our login. You should be able to create this form for yourself. I'm just going to paste in a real simple HTML form. Notice it's using form tag, not form for, so it's not object oriented. Form tag, and then I'm using text field tag, password field tag, and I'm sending in username and password as the two attributes to the action attempt login. That's a pretty straightforward form. There's no object involved. It's just two simple fields that we'll submit. Now, before we go back to our access controller and we start writing the processing for attempt login and logout, there's one more thing I want to do. I want to jump over to the config folder and open up routes. Notice that when I generated that, it added a couple of routes for me. I don't need those routes. Those are just simple named routes, and I don't need them because I've still got this default route down here that I enabled. So I'm still using that default routing, and I don't need to specify them one by one. But I do want to add another one here. I'm going to add match admin to, and it's going to match it to access menu. So what that means is if I go to the root of my site, localhost :3000/ and I type admin, it will try to take me to the menu. Now, if I'm not logged in, I'm going to be redirected from the menu to my login page. I haven't written that functionality yet, but that's going to be where we're headed with this. It will get redirected to the login page because I'm not authenticated. But if I am already logged in, then I'll just skip the login page, go straight to the menu, and be able to access the admin area. All I'm really doing is providing an alternate string that we can use to get to the menu. Okay, so I'll save those routes, and I'll go ahead and just close that up. Let's go back to the access controller now, and let's think about what attempt login ought to do. Well, if you think back to what we saw in the last movie, the way we do authentication is like this, right? Authorized user equals admin user authenticate with the username and password. So what are the username and password? Those are form values that are being passed in. So they're just going to be params username, and the password will be params password. So that's where we'll get those two values. We'll pass those into authenticate, and I'll either get back a user object or I'll get back false. So I can test for it. If we have an authorized user, and I'll just put an if-else statement here. So if they're authorized, then what do we want to do? We want to log them in, we want to redirect them to the menu, and we want to show them a message that they've been successfully logged in. Well, we already know how to do two of those three. I'm just going to put a placeholder here for marking the user as logged in. We're going to learn that in a bit. Now, if they're not authorized, then we're going to give them a notice saying, oops, sorry, some combination of username and password was incorrect. We're not going to tell them which one. We don't want to give them a hint that they did successfully hit on a valid username, for example, and then we'll redirect them back to that login form. So for the logout action, There's not a lot we can do right now, but I will put a placeholder in there. To do, we're going to mark the user as being logged out. We'll learn how to do that. And then we'll have a flash notice saying logged out or you have been logged out. And then we can redirect them back to the login form so that they could potentially log in again. All right, so let's try all this out. Now, we don't have a mechanism yet for restricting our access to certain pages. All the pages are still perfectly accessible, but our login form ought to work. We ought to be able to use the login form and either be sent to the menu or be sent to the login page if it failed. So let's go into the terminal first and Rails server. Let's just try it out. Firefox, localhost 3000. First, I'm just going to try admin, see if my route works. There it is. Nope, I've realized now I didn't put a layout at the top of this. So let's do that real quick. We want to have that same admin layout. What was the name of my layout there? It is admin. So layout, admin. Let's try that again. Let's reload the page. There we go. There's my admin layout. So you can see how we're going to have the different links here. There's nothing to restrict our access to it, but we should be able to test out the login form. So access/login. That'll take us to just a simple username password form. And now if we try something, let's just put in gibberish, login. Oops, invalid combination. All right, let's try something that I think is valid. If I remember what my password, I think it was secret password, log in, and there we are. You are now successfully logged in. So our authentication is working. We're able to send form values, process those, find out if the user's in the database, and then respond appropriately. Now log out at the moment doesn't do a lot. Log out access, well actually we can click the link here, log out, you have been logged out, and takes us back to the page. So it's doing what it ought to. But what we're missing here is the ability to remember the fact that we're logged in. That's the metaphor of the hand stamp that we had back at the very beginning. So that then when we come back here, we don't have to re-authenticate every time. We can just check for that hand stamp and see whether we can keep going. And that's also the answer to this: mark the user as logged in, mark the user as logged out. That's what we'll see how to do in the next movie.